In 2005, she started digging in the city of David with one goal in mind: King David's palace. Mining activity took place for a long time, and most of the mining operations took place underground. Historians believe that Solomon was a real person who lived in the 10th century BC. King Solomon is an intriguing figure. For nearly 3,000 years, one question has haunted historians, treasure hunters, and believers alike. Where is King Solomon buried? The ruler said to possess unimaginable wisdom. The king who commanded his wealth. The man linked to a temple so magnificent it became legend. And now, after generations of silent archaeologists claim they have finally opened what could be King Solomon's lost tomb. This isn't just another dusty excavation. This is a discovery that could shake biblical history to its core. Hidden beneath layers of stone and centuries of mystery, the sealed chamber had remained untouched. Or so everyone believed. When researchers carefully broke through the final barrier, they didn't just find bones and artifacts. They uncovered symbols, inscriptions, and objects that no one expected to survive the passage of time. Before we reveal what they found, hit like and subscribe, because discoveries like this, some people would rather you would never hear about them. Verified this discovery could rewrite what we know about ancient Israel's golden age. It could confirm stories long dismissed as myth, or it could spark even deeper questions about power, faith, and the secrets Solomon may have taken to his grave. What was really inside the tomb? And why does this discovery feel bigger than archaeology itself? But before we reveal what was found inside, hit like and subscribe. Discoveries like this aren't always meant to be seen. Solomon's kingdom. Solomon stepped into power as a teenager following in the footsteps of his father, King David. But he didn't just keep the kingdom alive. Atu transformed it. Trade exploded, gold poured in, and at the center of it all, he built the first temple. A 7-year masterwork glowing with cedar from Lebanon, gold panels that caught the sun, and stones so perfectly cut it barely needed mortar. The stories of his wise rulings are just as spectacular, like the one where 2 women claimed the same baby. Solomon offered to split the child in half, not out of cruelty, but to see who would give him up, and one did. That is how he found the real mother. That single moment turned him into a symbol of justice and intelligence across the ancient world. Even the Queen of Sheba came to see him, bringing caravans heavy with spices, gold, and riddles. She left stunned. Not only had Solomon matched her questions, but he had outshone every rumor she had heard about him. His empire stretched far beyond Jerusalem. Ships sailed to Oya and Tarshish, mysterious lands some believe were in Africa or India, bringing ivory apes and riches. In southern Israel's Timnah Valley, copper mines he owned churned out wealth that archaeologists are still uncovering today. But one mystery has always remained. Where is Solomon's Enotisep tomb? There is no stone marker, no chamber, nor is there anything to prove where he was laid to rest. Some swore it had to be beneath the Temple Mount. Others guessed secret caves or hidden chambers sealed off for millennia. Over time, the search lost steam with too many dead ends and too many legends. So, most experts had given up the discovery, but then something shifted. A discovery, accidental or fated, depending on who you ask, would crack this ancient riddle wide open. And what they found wasn't just a tomb. It was a message buried in silence for 3,000 years now, clawing its way back into the light. The relentless quest for the tomb. A single crack in the earth barely visible after a storm changed everything. For centuries, finding King Solomon's tomb felt like chasing shadows. From medieval knights digging under the Temple Mount to 19th century explorers tearing through the hills of Judea. Every search ended the same way, empty. Some left convinced the tomb never existed, while others blamed it on bad luck, or worse, bad maps. By the time the 21st century rolled around, Most experts had stopped looking altogether. But recently something shifted. Dr. Emily Carter, an archaeologist known more for dusty scrolls than camera, flashes was deep in Jerusalem's archives when she spotted something unusual. Tax records from Solomon's time buried. In Old Hebrew text was a hint. Payments sent to a location kept off the books. Placed near the city of David. A site so well hidden that even history had forgotten it existed. The city of David is the place where if you take a shovel and you dig whatever you pull out of, the ground is going to match the pages of the Bible. Armed with radar, technology that could see through solid rock, her team began scanning a rugged slope in Silwan. The ground fought back, with jagged limestone, unstable dirt, and constant delays from rising political tensions. But they pushed on, day after day, until nature stepped in. A sudden rainstorm loosened the hillside, revealing a shallow dip in the earth. Looking at that opening, there was something odd about it. It didn't belong. Beneath that spot, the radar lit up like a heartbeat, spotting tunnels that were not natural, but man-made and deep. The tunnel was carved into the rock at a depth of about 13 meters below this ground. The crew was amazed, and excitement hit like lightning. The team scrambled to stabilize the site. Every dig was a risk. They also discovered that the tunnel was constructed with fake entrances, and a single misstep could cause centuries of secrets to collapse with the rock. Dr. Carter spent long nights decoding fragments of ancient writing, piecing together a trail left behind to confuse thieves or tomb raiders. Symbols pointed toward a hidden entrance. Though not flashy, they were just smart and quietly buried in plain sight. The major part of this structure is still hidden and needs to be excavated. What we have in hand is less than a quarter. But that was not the real turning point. The turning point came when the team stumbled on a story, a half-forgotten tale passed down by shepherds about a hillside that glowed under moonlight, a wall that sparkled like stars. Dr. Carter stood at the edge of that same hill. The ground was damp, their boots sinking with every step, but something about the silence, the way the rocks held still, like they were keeping secrets, felt real. They were close. They could feel it. And just beyond that sealed tunnel, behind a doorway untouched for thousands of years, something was waiting to be found. What they discovered next didn't just rewrite history. It stopped them in their tracks, breaking the ancient seal. What if the only thing standing between the modern world and a 3,000-year-old secret was a stone slab that wasn't meant to be opened? The seal didn't crack open quietly. It roared as though something ancient had finally exhaled after millennia. After weeks of digging through jagged limestone dust and doubt, Dr. Emily Carter's crew had followed a paper trail from crumbling tax records to a forgotten hillside in Silwan. And now they stood before a stone slab buried so deep in time that it felt like the earth itself had tried to hide it. But this wasn't just any rock in the dirt. It was a barrier, warning, and a puzzle all in one. Getting through it wasn't as simple as pushing or pulling. This thing was part of a larger design, one meant to protect whatever lay behind it. Hidden inside the narrow tunnel walls were fake paths and dead ends, some engineered to collapse the whole system if disturbed. This was old stonework, but it was genius-level defense. A trap set by people who expected grave robbers and outsmarted them all. While the ground creaked and shifted under their boots, Dr. Carter studied old Hebrew markings near the entrance, a sequence of 7 lines, 7 symbols, and a carved pattern tied to the first temple's 7-year construction. It wasn't decoration, it was a clue. Her team got to work with laser tools and 3D scanners, mapping every groove and chamber like they were defusing a bomb. Tension hung in the air like thick fog. One wrong step could bury the entire team, literally. For 3 straight days, they adjusted, levers aligned gears, and held their breath. Every time stone scraped against stone, the deeper they got, the quieter the tunnel became, as if the mountain itself was listening. And then it happened. A heavy snap, a low rumble, and dust rained from the ceiling. The slab began to move. Not fast, not clean, but enough to reveal a dark slit into something mystical. They backed away, staring into that black void. No sound came out. No breeze, just cold air and darkness. Dr. Carter raised her hand, signaling the group to remain silent. No one spoke. No one moved. This was a breakthrough. It was the first breath of a story no one had told in thousands of years. A peek at Solomon's wealth. The moment the flashlight beam hit gold, everything stopped. No talking, no breathing, just the quiet shock of realizing they weren't chasing a myth anymore. They were standing in it deep beneath the city of David, in a sealed chamber untouched for thousands of years. Dr. Carter's team stood shoulder to shoulder, flashlights trembling in their hands. What they were seeing wasn't a rumor. It wasn't folklore. It was treasure piled stacked and tucked into corners like it had been waiting. Along the walls sat golden vessels, their surfaces carved with ancient Hebrew flashing as though they had just been polished. The room smelled of thyme spices and resins. Something earthy and sweet clung to the air. At the far end, a 7-branched menorah rose from the floor, heavy and perfect. Its curves, its base, everything matched what the first temple supposedly held. But this wasn't a museum replica. This was real, possibly original, and it was just the beginning. Everywhere they looked, the chamber whispered stories. Fragments of silk, faded but unmistakable, hinted at trade routes stretching all the way to India. Delicate ivory carvings spoke of deals made across African kingdoms. Small jewelry boxes, some still latched, held earrings, and chains studded with emeralds, rubies, and lapis. One archaeologist, overwhelmed, leaned in and muttered, "This makes the British Museum look like a thrift shop." Even more stunning, a sealed clay jar, some cracked open, releasing a puff of scent. Saffron, frankincense, and something citrusy. Spices, so fresh, it was as if time had just paused. It felt almost too perfect, like someone had planned it all to be found. But not everything added up. Some pieces had symbols no one could place. The style on a few items looked newer, or maybe just different. Could they belong to Rehoboam Solomon's son, or another ruler who stashed his wealth alongside a legend? The excitement was real, but so was the doubt. And in a room like that, doubt echoes loudly. Still, every item, each jewel, each carving told a different story, and together they painted a picture that felt straight out of scripture. But as dazzling as it was, the chamber felt like a trailer to something bigger. The team moved carefully. Laser scanners mapped every surface. Not one artifact was touched without documentation, because one wrong step, one clumsy hand could erase what the desert had guarded for centuries. The menorah alone could rewrite what we know about the temple, but no one was celebrating just yet, because they knew they had come for a tomb. And this place didn't look like one. The unexplainable symbols and hidden knowledge. The gold was stunning, but the writing on the walls, that's what really stopped them in their tracks. Still buzzing from the treasure chamber, Dr. Carter's team shifted their focus to something far stranger. Torchlight revealed a cluster of markings carved into the stone. Symbols that didn't just decorate the walls, they seemed to hum with meaning. Right in the center was a star-shaped seal, sharp and deliberate, almost identical to the one described in ancient texts as the Mark of Solomon. Not just a king's emblem, but according to legend, a magical tool used to command spirits. And it didn't stop there. The carvings ran in tight geometric lines, some simple, others layered in spirals and angles so precise they looked like blueprints. One archaeologist whispered, "This is mathematics, but not just temple measurements. This is next level stuff." Some symbols mapped out ratios, angles, and architecture so detailed that it made the 10th century BCE feel suspiciously futuristic. Even Dr. Carter joked, "We came looking for a tomb and found Solomon's calculus notebook." Then came the tablets stacked in the corner like they were waiting to be read. A set of clay tablets carried dense Hebrew script. Some faded, others perfectly engraved. One described temple dimensions almost word for word from the book of 1 Kings. But another was different. The language twisted. The structure broke rules. It read more like a riddle than a record. This tablet referenced something odd, a key tied to hidden knowledge. Dr. Carter paused. Was it a nod to the mystical key of Solomon? A text tied to rituals and ancient codes long dismissed as myth. No one said it out loud, but the thought was there, What if these weren't just instructions for building something? What if they were hiding something? Then someone spotted it. A chest tucked inside a dark opening in the wall, nearly missed, roughly the size of a carry-on bag. It looked heavy, sealed with metal latches and carved with the same star symbol from the wall. There were no hinges or obvious locks. You could feel the air shift as the team crowded around. No one touched it. Opening it was risky. Too risky. But the temptation was thick. Was this where Solomon kept the real secrets? Could it point to the Ark of the Covenant? Or would it just open a door to more questions? The academic firestorm. It wasn't the treasure or the menorah that cracked the world open. It was a single sentence, carved into stone that sounded like Solomon speaking from the grave. Dr. Carter's team had just finished deciphering the strange star-shaped carvings when they spotted it. Tucked along the tomb's eastern wall, barely visible in the torchlight, were 5 lines in ancient Hebrew, smoothed by time, but still sharp enough to stir a chill. They read, "May wisdom guide my hand as stars guide sailors." That line hit hard not just because it echoed the poetic tone of Proverbs, but because it sounded personal, like someone, maybe Solomon himself, was leaving behind an instruction meant to survive centuries of silence. The tent back at base camp lit up with noise as laptops pinged, phones rang, and photos of the inscription zipped across continents. By the time the sun rose over Jerusalem, the academic world was already on fire. Some experts hailed it as the smoking gun. The writing style, the language, the location, all of it matched Solomon's reign, right down to the 970 to 931 BC dating from the chamber walls. They pointed to earlier finds, the menorah, the trade goods, and the architectural notes, and said this was it, the missing link, the man behind the myth. But not everyone was buying it. Critics jumped in fast, tearing the evidence apart piece by piece. They questioned the carvings' authenticity. Some even said the wording felt too polished, too perfect. Others noticed faint symbols near the prayer that looked Persian, suggesting someone centuries later could have carved it to mimic Solomon's voice. Inside conference halls and online forums, it was chaos. Professors argued over each other on live streams. Journal editors delayed publications to weigh new theories, and headlines screamed everything from Solomon found to holy hoax. And right in the middle of it all, Dr. Carter stood calmly in the chaos. "We didn't set out to find a king," she said, "but the clues kept piling up. If that's not worth investigating, what is?" Every line of that inscription felt heavier now more than just words. It hinted at a king wrestling with power, staring at the stars for guidance, and possibly, just possibly, leaving behind the only first-person trace of his rule. A discovery that shakes beliefs. Just days after decoding that haunting prayer, possibly penned by Solomon, himself doctor, Carter's team stumbled on something even more explosive. Near the back of the chamber, under a thin layer of dust, was a fresh set of inscriptions in ancient Hebrew, chiseled with care, describing a royal visit in 950 BC from the Queen of Sheba. The moment they translated her name, it felt like time stopped, because this wasn't just another biblical reference. This was the exact story told in the book of 1 Kings and the Quran. Solomon and Sheba, 2 figures separated by history, yet revered in Judaism. Christianity and Islam were now possibly united in stone. Rabbis huddled over Torah scrolls. Imams compared passages from the 27th chapter of Surah. Priests whispered over weathered Bibles. The carving didn't just match scripture. It seemed to bring it to life like a bridge made of stone spanning millennia. But for every believer celebrating a scholar was raising an eyebrow. Some called the timing too perfect. Others pointed to stylistic abnormalities in the carving symbols that didn't quite match the 10th century BCE. Could it have been added later? A tribute by a devoted scribe, or worse, a forgery meant to fuel religious flames? Tension flared fast. Online panels turned into shouting matches. Some Islamic scholars argued the tomb's wealth clashed with how the Quran described Solomon. Wise, yes, but never indulgent. Meanwhile, political leaders in Jerusalem argued over who had a claim to the site. Religious lines already tight began to pulse with new heat. But beneath the noise, something deeper stirred. Because the carvings implied more than a royal visit. They hinted at an alliance trade diplomacy, and shared knowledge between two ancient giants. And if that really happened, it could mean the sacred stories aren't just spiritual, they're historical. A king's seal unearthed. It wasn't another carving. It wasn't a scroll. It was something smaller, but heavier than all the others. Folded in the corner of the chamber, behind a cracked stone table no one had touched in centuries, lay a gold ring, thick, solid, and unmistakably royal. At first, it looked like just another buried ornament, but then the light caught it. Carved into the face of the ring was a six-pointed star. Now, this wasn't some modern symbol pulled from today's flag. This was rough hand-carved and ancient, but it bore just enough of a resemblance to the Star of David to stop the entire room cold. Lab tests would later confirm it. The metallurgy lined up perfectly with the 10th century BCE. But even before that, the whispers started. Was this Solomon's ring his royal seal? The same one that might have stamped trade pacts with Phoenicia letters to Sheba and decrees that shaped the kingdom of Israel. Then it dawned on them. This wasn't just a ring. It was a signature. Still, caution crept in. Some experts warned that similar rings had turned up from the 8th century BCE, mostly linked to King Hezekiah. The Star of David wasn't widely known until much later in Jewish tradition. So was this a fluke, a family heirloom, or had Solomon adopted the symbol long before history recorded it? The team hunched over microscopes, scanning the seal's edges with laser precision. Each groove, each scratch, was debated like it held the answer to everything. Handling it was no joke either. Micro tools, oxygen-controlled cases, and days of cleaning without ever actually touching the thing. One wrong breath and it could crumble. But the risk was worth it because if this ring truly belonged to Solomon, it could be the first direct link between his hand and the world he ruled. Echoes of Solomon's music. Just behind the wall that held the golden seal, the team found something no one expected. What looked like a song carved into stone. At first, it seemed like ordinary script, but as the dust cleared and flashlights moved across the surface, the pattern became obvious. The markings repeated in rhythm. The spacing was deliberate. Small symbols appeared that didn't look like words. They looked like sound. Dr. Carter leaned closer and whispered, "These aren't prayers." Their notes carved into that cold limestone wall buried for nearly 3,000 years was what appeared to be a musical score. And it wasn't simple. The carving showed layered patterns connected to ancient instruments. Harps, lyres, maybe even flutes. One symbol closely resembled the 10-stringed harp associated with King David. If true, it suggested that Solomon inherited not only a throne, but a tradition of sacred music. Music historians outside the site immediately began debating. Some said the style matched early Hebrew traditions. Others argued it looked too refined, possibly influenced by Babylonian or even Persian culture. To test it, an intern carefully recreated the pattern on a replica harp. The sound was rough and incomplete, but the melody sent chills through the room. These weren't random marks. They seemed like instructions for worship. Still, doubts remained. Were the carvings truly from Solomon's time? Or were they added later, to honor him, authentic or not? The feeling inside the chamber changed. It no longer felt like a grave. It felt alive. Every marking was scanned carefully. One wrong touch could erase history forever. Is this really Solomon's tomb? After all the discoveries, the golden seal, the harp carvings, the temple symbols, here's the truth. No one expected. They still haven't found Solomon's body. Despite dramatic headlines, there was no sarcophagus, no skeleton, no royal burial mask. Everything pointed to the 10th century BCE Solomon's era. But this wasn't clearly a burial chamber. Instead, it may have been a royal archive, or a private shrine, a place preserving legacy rather than remains. Inside their tent near the city of David, Dr. Carter's team reviewed scans and maps. The menorah symbols, references to the Queen of Sheba, the musical inscriptions, all signs pointed towards Solomon. But without a body, it's like finding a crown with no king. Her eye ground scans revealed something even more intriguing. Hollow spaces deeper below geometric structures carved into bedrock, possibly more chambers. But excavation near the Temple Mount is politically and religiously sensitive. Digging further requires more than tools. It requires global agreement. So for now, the team waits. Solomon's final resting place remains hidden, but the ground hasn't gone silent. And somewhere beneath that ancient stone, the story may not be finished.